How's everybody doing? A good Moedim L'Simcha to you, my holy brothers and sisters. Let's light up the darkness here in the intermediate days of Sukkot. Who's in the house on a Tuesday? Yom Shlishi. Steven in New Hampshire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Paul in Chicago, Bill in mid-Missouri, Bella in Florida, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Neck, Ryan in Florida, John in Scotland, Lucy in Minnesota, Karen in Northern California, Sharon in the Sukkah where it's a little bit chilly, Marjorie in Virginia. Welcome, everybody. Our daf is page Nun 50, page 50 here in Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. Continuing our journey through chapter 2. Yesterday at the very end of class, we read Mishna number 4 here in chapter 2, where it basically said that if a man said to a woman, be betrothed to me on condition that I am a priest, and he turned out to be a Levite, no betrothal. But also, if he said on condition that I am a Levite and he turned out to be a Cohen, still no betrothal, even though you would say that, well, that just means he has a more prominent or more respected and revered lineage. If he's a Cohen, which is even greater than what he promised to be a Levite, still no betrothal. So if you're going to say on condition that I am such and such, even if you over-deliver, no betrothal is created. So we pick it up near the bottom of page 49b on the Gemara of Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 2. And the Gemara relates there was a certain man who sold his property with the intention of ascending to Eretz Yisrael. So you know that they're talking about somebody in Bavel, right, in the Jewish community in Babylonia, who's saying that he's selling some property, and he told the buyer that the reason he's selling his property is because he has the intention of making Aliyah. He is going to move to Israel. We always talk about ascending to Israel, even if we're going there from a place that's a higher altitude or further north. We say when you're moving to Israel that you are ascending to Israel. You are making Aliyah. So there was a certain man who sold his property with the intention of ascending to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. But at the time that he sold the property, he did not say anything with regard to his intention. So that's why he did it, but he didn't say so. Ultimately, he did not ascend to Eretz Yisrael, and he wished to renege on the sale. Rava said, since he did not explicitly state that he was selling his property on the condition that he ascend to Eretz Yisrael, that is an unspoken matter that remained in the heart. And unspoken matters that remain in the heart are not significant matters. And the Gemara asks, from where does Rava learn this principle? If we say it is from that which we learn in a Baraisa, now we're on page 50a, and the Baraisa says, with regard to one who pledges to bring a burnt offering, the verse states, quote, if his offering be a burnt offering of the herd, he shall offer it a male without blemish. He shall bring it to the door of the tent of meeting according to his will before the Lord. Leviticus 1:3. And the seemingly superfluous words, he shall offer it, right? Because he could have just said, if his offering be a burnt offering of the herd, a male without blemish, he shall bring it, right? He shall bring it to the door of the tent of meeting. So why does it say, if his offering be a burnt offering of the herd, he shall offer it, and then again, he shall bring it? So he shall offer it is superfluous. And these superfluous words always invite interpretation by the sages. So he shall offer it teaches that they coerce him to bring the offering because he pledged to bring it. I might have thought that it can be offered entirely against his will by taking it from his possession and sacrificing it. You might have thought that once he made a pledge to bring that offering, if he himself is not bringing it, so the court could send an agent of the court and just take one of his animals from his herd, even against his will, so that he fulfills his pledge. But no, instead what they do is they coerce him until he agrees to fulfill his pledge. They don't just take it. Why is that? I might have thought that it can be offered entirely against his will by taking it from his possession and sacrificing it. Therefore, the verse states, according to his will. So how can these texts be reconciled? They coerce him until he says, I want to bring the offering. Right? It's a weird type of coercion. Like he has to say, I want to bring the offering, but since he made a pledge, they will, for his own benefit, coerce him to fulfill his pledge by saying, I want to bring it. They don't just take it from him. Right? They coerce him until he says, I want to bring the offering. And the Gemara asks, but why should this be effective? If in his heart, right, if they need to coerce him, then in his heart, he doesn't really want to bring it. Now, it's true that earlier he made a pledge, but now that it's time to fulfill the pledge, he doesn't want to fulfill the pledge. So how can they coerce him until he says, I want to bring it, when in fact he doesn't want to bring it? How does that work? So why should this be effective? In his heart, it is not satisfactory for him to bring the offering, and it is not according to his will. Rather, is it not because we say unspoken matters that remain in the heart are not significant matters, and his intention is rendered irrelevant by his explicit statement that he says, I want to bring it. Now, they coerce him to say that, but his mouth said, I want to bring it. And the Gemara rejects this. But perhaps in that situation, it is different, since it is clear to us that it is satisfactory for him to achieve atonement. He made a pledge. Now it's time for him to bring a burnt offering. So of course it is in his best interest to bring it. So we can't assume that in that situation where it might be against his will, but it is definitely for his own good, that we coerce him to say, I want to bring it. But that doesn't mean that we can learn out from that situation that in general, unspoken matters are insignificant. So rather, the Gemara derives a proof, right? We're trying to prove this idea that matters that are in the heart, meaning they are unspoken, are not legally significant. You might have thought that, you might have intended that, you might have wanted to, you might have yearned for it, but you didn't say so, so legally it's insignificant. What's the proof of that? So the Gemara derives a proof from the latter clause of that same Baraisa. And similarly, you find with bills of divorce, with gets, right, with a gittin, of the bills of divorce of women and bills of manumission of slaves, that when the court rules that a man must divorce his wife or he must free his slave, and he does not want to, well, they coerce him until he says, I want to divorce my wife or I want to free my slave. But why should this be effective? In his heart, it is not satisfactory for him to divorce her or to free the slave. Rather, is it not because we say that unspoken matters that remain in the heart are not significant matters? But the Gemara rejects this proof as well. But perhaps in those situations it is different, because it is a mitzvah to listen to the statements of the sages. And the assumption is that when he is required to divorce his wife or free his slave, we're not going into the reasons for that, but there are certain situations where a man must divorce his wife, even against his will. So then they make him do it. So in those situations, okay, the reason we allow it to happen is because, the sages spoke and he has to do the will of the sages. Everyone is bound by the will of the sages. So that doesn't prove that even though, that we do that even against his will, that the thoughts of his heart are that he doesn't want to do it. That doesn't prove that unspoken matters remain insignificant, because there's an other issue there, that he has to do the will of the sages. So rather, Rav Yosef says the proof that matters that remain unspoken in the heart are legally insignificant is from here, this tractate, but on page 64a, in the case of one who betroths a woman and he said, I thought that she was the daughter of a priest, and she is in fact the daughter of a Levite, or I thought she was the daughter of a Levite, and she is found to be the daughter of a priest, or I thought she was poor and it turns out she's wealthy, or I thought she was wealthy and it turns out she's poor. In all these cases, she is betrothed despite the man's mistaken assumption. Why? Because she did not mislead him. Okay, he thought that, but he didn't think that based on her statements. But why is she betrothed? He said, I thought that she had a different characteristic, and he betrothed her with that in his mind. So you might say, well, he was thinking something different. So he wouldn't have betrothed her if he hadn't made this mistaken assumption. So wouldn't you say that the betrothal is not a betrothal since his intention was different? But now that we're saying the betrothal is a betrothal, maybe that's the proof that matters that remain unspoken in the heart are legally insignificant. And Abaye said to him, yeah, but you can't use that Mishna as a proof. Why? Perhaps it is different there, since the ruling there is that she requires a get only as a stringency, and they are not definitively betrothed, right? You might say that, well, actually, we're not quite sure that betrothal was created when he betrothed her based on his own mistaken assumption. But just in case betrothal was created, we require him to give her a get in order to break off that betrothal. But we haven't proven conclusively that betrothal was created despite his mistaken assumption, and therefore we haven't proven conclusively that thoughts that remain in the heart and are not said aloud are legally insignificant. Rather, Abaye said that the proof is from a different Mishnah. Maybe that same Mishnah. And in all these cases, this Mishnah now, our Mishnah that we're discussing now, number 4, is from here. And that in all these cases, despite the fact, right, all these cases where he said, I'm a priest, and it turns out he's a Levite, or he said he's a Levite, it turns out he's a priest. In all these cases, if she later stated, I intended to become betrothed to him anyway, right? She didn't care that he said he was a Levite and it turned out he was a priest, or he said he was a priest and it turned out he was a Levite. She didn't care about that. And she said she didn't care. But she said so afterward, right? So he said, be betrothed to me on condition that I am a priest. He turned out to be a Levite. So then they thought they were betrothed. And then later it turned out that he's not what he said he was. And then she says, it doesn't matter to me. I didn't care about that anyway. Nevertheless, there is no betrothal because his condition was not fulfilled. And the fact that she says that I didn't care about that, but she only said it after the betrothal was allegedly created, doesn't change the fact that betrothal was not created. Why? Because she didn't say it out loud. This must be a proof that thoughts which remain in the heart and are not spoken are legally insignificant. And the Gemara rejects this proof, but perhaps it is different there, as since he stipulated explicitly that a certain condition was true, it is not in her power to uproot his condition through thoughts alone. And so that's why it doesn't create, that betrothal is not created. It's not that generally speaking, thoughts that remain in the heart and are not spoken are legally insignificant. It's that in this situation, unspoken thoughts are not going to be enough to uproot the problem with that betrothal, with his unfulfilled condition. So rather, Rav Chia bar Avin says there was an incident of this kind in Rav Chisda's study hall. And Rav Chisda brought the case to Rav Huna's study hall, and they resolved it from this Mishnah in Meila 21a. In the case of one who says to his agent, bring me such and such an item from the window ledge or from the box, forgetting that the item in question was consecrated property, and any use of it would constitute misuse of consecrated property, and the agent brought it to him. Then, although at that point the owner said, my intention was that you bring me the item only from the other place, once the agent brought the item to him from that place that he had mentioned, once the agent uses it, the owner is liable for having misused consecrated property. But why should he be responsible? He said, my intention was for that other place. So the agent did not fulfill his mission. Rather, is it not because we say that unspoken matters that remain in the heart are not significant matters? And the Gemara rejects this proof too. But perhaps it is different there, since it is suspected that he is coming to exempt himself from bringing an offering for misuse of consecrated property by claiming that he intended a different item. Since there is cause to question the truth of his statement that he intended that the agent bring the item from a different place, the claim is not accepted, and this cannot serve as a proof that in general, unspoken matters that remain in the heart are not significant. So the Gemara responds, if all he wanted to do was exempt himself from the obligation to bring an offering, he could have said that the misuse was intentional. As one who misuses consecrated property intentionally is not obligated to bring an offering. Therefore, there is no cause to question the truth of his statement that he had intended that the agent bring the item from a different place. And the Gemara counters that argument by saying, it is not common for a person to place himself in the category of a wicked person by claiming to have committed a transgression intentionally that he actually committed unintentionally. Therefore, once again, there is cause to question the truth of his statement that he had intended that the agent bring the item from a different place. And we still have not proven that matters which remain unspoken in the heart are not legally significant. So the Gemara continues to ask, to exempt himself from the obligation to bring an offering, he could have said, after the agent left, I remembered that it was consecrated property. Such a claim would also have rendered him exempt, as we learned in the same Mishna. If one sent an agent to bring a particular item and the owner remembered that it was consecrated and the agent did not remember but proceeded to fulfill his agency, it is the agent who has misused consecrated property and is liable to bring an offering, not the one who designated him, since the latter remembered and canceled the agency. There is no cause to question the truth of his statement that he had intended the agent to bring the item from a different place. Therefore, the fact that his statement is not accepted can serve as proof that in general, unspoken matters that remain in the heart are not significant. And the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who sold his property with the intention of ascending to Eretz Yisrael, and explicitly stated his intention to the buyer. And he ascended to Eretz Yisrael, but he was not able to settle there. Upon his return to Babylonia, he sought to nullify the sale of his property. And Rava said, whoever ascends to Eretz Yisrael does so with the intention of settling there. And as he was not able to settle there, he can nullify the sale. And there are those who say a different version, that Rava said the opposite. He intended to ascend to Eretz Yisrael, and he ascended. So he can't come back and nullify the sale. And the Gemara relates a similar incident. There was a certain man who sold his property with the intention of ascending to Eretz Yisrael, but ultimately he did not ascend there. Rav Ashi said if he had wanted to do so, he could have ascended. Since the matter depended upon him, there are no grounds for nullifying the sale. And there are those who say that Rav Ashi said as follows, if he had wanted to do so, couldn't he have ascended? Since nothing prevented him from leaving, the sale is not nullified. And the Gemara asks, what is the difference between the two versions of Rav Ashi's statement? And the Gemara answers, there is a difference between them in a case where circumstances beyond his control occurred along the way, preventing him from going. According to the first version of the statement of Rav Ashi, the sale is upheld. But according to the second version, where Rav Ashi responded in the form of a question, the implication is that if there actually had been something that prevented him from ascending, the sale would be nullified. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 4. Here comes Mishnah number 5. In the case of one who says to his agent, go and betroth for me so-and-so in such and such a place, and the agent went and betrothed the woman in a different place. She is not betrothed, since the principal instructed his agent that the betrothal take place in a particular location. But if the man said to the agent, go and betroth the woman for me, she is in such and such a place, and the agent betrothed her in a different place, then she is betrothed. Since the man did not mean that the agent should betroth her specifically in that place, but was merely telling him how he could find her so he could fulfill his mission of betrothing her. And that's Mishnah number 5. And the Gemara, short Gemara, the Gemara comments, and we also learned in a Mishnah with regard to bills of divorce on Gittin 65a, with regard to one who says to his agents, give this bill of divorce to my wife in such and such a place, and they gave it to her in another place, the divorce is not valid. But if he said to them, she is in such and such a place, and they gave it to her in a different place, then it is valid. And the Gemara comments, and it is necessary to state this law with regard to both betrothal and divorce, because at the time it taught us only with regard to betrothal. You might say, in a case where he is coming to draw her near to him through betrothal, he thinks, they love me in this place and will not say negative remarks about me, but they hate me in that place, and will say negative remarks about me. Therefore, he told the agent to perform the betrothal in a certain place, and is particular that it take place only there. But with regard to bills of divorce, when he is coming to distance her from him by divorcing her, you might say he does not care where the divorce itself is performed, and the Tana therefore informs us that this is not the case, and conversely. If the Tana taught us only with regard to divorce, I would have said that he is particular only in the case of divorce, because in this place it is acceptable for him to degrade himself through divorce, whereas in that place it is not acceptable for him to do so. But with regard to betrothal, which involves no degradation, you might say he does not care where he betroths her, therefore it is necessary to state the halacha in both cases. And bottom line, whether the agent is bringing the get or bringing betrothal to the woman, if the principal says to her, betroth her to me or divorce her from me, or give her the get in such and such a place, and the agent does it in a different place, no betrothal or no divorce. If he says, give her the get or betroth her to me, she is in such and such a place, then if the agent betroths her or divorces her in a different place, it doesn't matter, because the agent was just saying the mission is, your agency is, hand her the get or betroth her to me, and I'm just giving you some extra information that is useful to you about where to find her. And that's different than stipulating a condition that she must be betrothed or must be divorced in a specific place. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Here's Mishnah number 6. In the case of one who betroths a woman on the condition that there are no vows incumbent upon her to fulfill, and it was found that there were vows incumbent upon her to fulfill, she is not betrothed, since his condition was not fulfilled. If he married her without saying anything about whether she has vows or not, he did not stipulate anything about whether she has vows or not, and it was found later that there are vows incumbent upon her to fulfill, the marriage takes effect. Nevertheless, he has the right to divorce her, and she is divorced without receiving payment of her ketubah, her marriage contract, as it is assumed that he would not have married her had he known that she was limited by her vows. Similarly, if he betrothed her on the condition that there are no blemishes upon her, and she was discovered to have blemishes, she is not betrothed. In a case where he married her without specification, and she was later discovered to have blemishes, he has the right to divorce her, and she is divorced without receiving payment of her ketubah. As to what is defined as a blemish, the rule is that all the blemishes that disqualify priests from performing the temple service, as detailed in Tractate Bechoros, also disqualify women from receiving their marriage contract in case of divorce. And now the Gemara on Mishnah number 6 is even shorter than Mishnah number 6. And the Gemara comments, and we also learned a Mishnah like this with regard to the laws of marriage contracts, as the same Mishnah appears in Tractate Ketubot on page 72b. And the Gemara explains, here it was necessary for the Tana to mention this law with regard to betrothal, and he taught the halach of marriage contracts due to teaching the halach of betrothal. And there it was necessary for the Tana to mention this law with regard to marriage contracts, and he taught the laws of betrothal due to teaching the law of marriage contracts. So, same principle applies, and we move on. Mishnah number 7 here in chapter 2. In the case of one who betroths two women together with an item worth 1 peruta, so that the value of each woman's share was not worth the minimum value of 1 peruta, or one who betroths one woman with an item worth less than 1 peruta, despite the fact that he later sent the traditional gifts of a groom to the bride, which would be worth much more than 1 peruta. Nevertheless, she is not betrothed because he sent the gifts on account of the first betrothal, i.e. the item whose value to the woman was less than 1 peruta, and not to effect betrothal. The gifts were sent later. It's the gifts of a groom to a bride. They weren't sent in order to create betrothal. The betrothal was attempted to be created with an item worth less than 1 peruta. So in fact, no betrothal was created. And similarly, if there was a minor who betrothed a woman and he sent her gifts after he became an adult, the assumption is that he sent them on account of his betrothal when he was still a minor. And since betrothal performed by a minor is of no account, she is not betrothed. And that is Mishnah number 7. Here's the Gemara. And it is necessary for all these cases to be stated in the Mishnah despite their apparent similarity, as had the Tana taught us only the case of one who betroths two women with an item worth one peruta, we would have said, since enough of his money for betrothal goes out, i.e. is spent, he errs, he makes a mistake, and he thinks that he can betroth two women with one peruta. And the gifts that he later sends are not for the sake of betrothal. But if he betrothed a woman with an item worth less than one peruta, you might say he knows that betrothal does not take effect with an item worth less than one peruta. And when he later sends gifts, he sends them with the intention of betrothal. And she should consequently become betrothed with them. The Mishnah therefore teaches us that she is not betrothed even in that case. And at the time of the Mishnah taught us only these two cases, we would have said that they were necessary because the difference in law between betrothal performed with an item worth one peruta and betrothal performed with an item worth less than one peruta is not established or clear to people. And as he might have thought in those cases that his initial betrothal was valid despite each woman receiving less than one peruta, the gifts that he sent later were not sent for the sake of betrothal. But in the case of a minor who betroths a woman, everyone knows that the betrothal of a minor is nothing. And you might say that when he later sends gifts, he sends them for the sake of betrothal. So you might think that then she is betrothed. The Mishnah therefore teaches us that the same law applies in this case as well. Gifts sent later don't create betrothal. The betrothal of a minor is no betrothal at all, so no betrothal has been created yet. It was stated that the Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, discuss the following matter. Rav Huna says one must be concerned about gifts. If a woman agreed to a betrothal and the prospective husband sent her gifts in the presence of witnesses, one must be concerned about the possibility that he sent them for the sake of betrothal. Therefore, the woman may not become betrothed to another man without first receiving a bill of divorce from this one. And Rabbah similarly says that one must be concerned about gifts. And Rabbah says, and we raised an objection against this law of ours, as the Mishnah teaches, even if he sent gifts later, she is not betrothed. And Abaye said to him, there in the Mishnah, the reason is, as it teaches, because he sent the gifts on account of the first betrothal, thinking they were betrothed. Therefore, there is no concern that he might have sent them for the sake of creating betrothal. But in this case, where he had not betrothed her beforehand, he might have intended to betroth her by sending her gifts. So we should be concerned that a betrothal was created, even though it's a little ambiguous. There are those who say a different version of this discussion. Rabbah says, from where do I say this law, that one must be concerned about gifts? I have learned it from the reason she is not betrothed, as the Mishnah teaches. Because he sent the gifts on account of the first betrothal, meaning he thinks that they were already betrothed and now he's just sending gifts. This indicates that it is here that there is no concern for that he betrothed her. Here there is no concern that he betrothed her, since he erred and thinks she is already betrothed to him by the first act of betrothal, which perhaps he used less than an item worth less than one peruta, and that there is no need to betroth her again. But generally, where this type of mistake is not possible, right? In a situation where he doesn't think that he's already betrothed her, like he just talked about betrothal, right? Like they talked about getting betrothed, but they didn't do it. And then he sends gifts. And she accepts the gifts. Did a betrothal just happen? That's what we're discussing. He doesn't say, be betrothed to me with this gift. But they talked about betrothal. And then he sent a gift worth more than one peruta and she accepted it. Are we concerned that a betrothal was created? Maybe she just thought she was receiving a gift, and then later she wants to accept betrothal from another man. But if we are concerned that these gifts might have created a betrothal, then she's going to require a get from the first man before she can go and be betrothed to a second man. And Abaye rejects this proof, as perhaps the Tana of the Mishnah is speaking utilizing the style of, it is not necessary. The Mishnah stated for stylistic reasons a law that it did not need to state, and it should be understood like this. It is not necessary to state that this law, it is not necessary to state this law in general in a case that does not involve a prior act of betrothal when he had not entered the laws, i.e. begun the process of betrothal at all. and it would never have entered his mind that the gifts should be considered to be for betrothal. Rather, even here in the case of the Mishna, when he has already entered the laws of betrothal by attempting to betroth this woman with an item worth less than 1 peruta, one might say that the gifts should be considered given for the sake of betrothal. The Tana therefore teaches us that there is no concern for betrothal even in that case. It is thereby possible to object to this inference of Rabbah. And the Gemara asks, what conclusion was reached about it? Must one be concerned that the gifts might have been given for the sake of betrothal or not? And the Gemara answers, Rav Papa says, in a place where the custom is that men first betroth women and afterward send gifts, we are concerned that he might already have betrothed her or is sending the gifts for the sake of betrothal, since that is the only situation in which gifts are typically sent. But in a place where the men first send gifts and afterward betroth women, we are not concerned that the gifts are for betrothal, because the custom in those locations is that they're first sending gifts just to open the conversation, not for the sake of creating betrothal, and later they betroth. The Gemara questions this idea. In a place where they betroth women and afterwards send gifts, it is obvious that if a man sends a woman a gift, he must have already betrothed her. The Gemara clarifies, no, it is necessary to teach this law due to a place where most men betroth women and afterwards send gifts, and the minority of the men in those locations send gifts and afterward betroth. Lest you say we should be concerned about the minority and say she is not betrothed, Rav Papa therefore teaches us that the behavior of the minority is not taken into account. So the Gemara discusses a related topic. Rav Achabar Rav Huna inquired of Rava if a woman's marriage contract was established, i.e. seen by people in the marketplace. What is the law? Is she assumed to be married? And Rava said to him, and should we establish her as a married woman? Because a marriage contract was established in the marketplace? Since a marriage contract can be written by a man even before betrothal, and without the woman's consent, its existence does not prove that she is married. And the Gemara asks what conclusion was reached about it. And the Gemara answers, Rav Ashi says, in a place where men first betroth women and afterward write a marriage contract, we are concerned that he had betrothed her. But in a place where they write the marriage contract first and afterward betroth women, we are not concerned that she is married simply because her marriage contract was cited in the marketplace. And the Gemara questions this. In a place where men first betroth women and afterward write the marriage contract, it is obvious that there should be a concern that he has betrothed her. And the Gemara clarifies, no, it is necessary to teach this law due to a place where a scribe is not commonly available. Lest you say that he wrote the marriage contract early because there was a scribe who happened to be there, and the prospective husband took the opportunity to avail himself of the scribe's services while intending to perform the betrothal later. Rav Ashi therefore teaches us that there is no concern that he might have done so, since the custom is to first betroth the woman. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 7. Right? We're banging them out. We must be near the end of the chapter. Mishnah number 8. In the case of one who betroths a woman and her daughter, can you betroth a woman and her daughter? No, you cannot. This is an impossible betrothal. In the case of one who betroths a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister in one act of betrothal by saying, you are both betrothed to me, what is the result? Neither of them is betrothed to him. And an incident occurred involving 5 women, and among them were 2 sisters. And one person gathered a basket of figs that were from the field, and the fruit was of the sabbatical year. And he said, you are hereby all betrothed to me with this basket. And one of them accepted it on behalf of all of them. And the sages said, the sisters are not betrothed. Interesting. But it seems that the other 3 women were betrothed. Let's talk about it. That's Mishnah number 8. The Gemara. With regard to the law that betrothal does not take effect if one betroths these 2 women simultaneously, the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? And Rami Bar Chama said, It is, as the verse states, and you shall not take a woman to her sister to be rival to her. Leviticus 18:18. The Torah states, when he betroths them together so that they would become rival wives to one another, another way of saying co-wives, he will not be able to take, i.e., he will not be able to betroth even one of them, right? You cannot marry two sisters. In fact, even if you marry a woman and divorce her, you cannot marry her sister as long as the first sister is still alive. So you certainly can't betroth them at the same time. The question is, if you try to betroth both of them at the same time, did you betroth either of them? And the Mishnah says, no, you did nothing. You did not betroth either one of them. So Rava said to him, if so, how would you explain this? That it is written at the end of the passage, whoever shall do any of these abominations, even the souls that do them, shall be cut off from among their people. Leviticus 18:29. If betrothal does not take effect with her, then what renders him liable to receive excision from the world to come? This chorus that is implied by the verse. If he is not betrothed to either woman, and he engages in intercourse with either one, he is not liable for chorus, as this punishment is incurred for this sin only if he engaged in intercourse with the sister of his wife. So rather, Rava says the verse is discussing a case where I'm almost done. If you have questions or comments, get them in now. Let me reload that. Okay, so rather, Rava says the verse is discussing a case where he betrothed them consecutively. He first betrothed one sister and then engaged in intercourse with the other, which accounts for the punishment of chorus. And the Mishnah is to be explained in accordance with the statement of Rabbah. As Rabbah says, any matters that cannot be accomplished sequentially cannot be accomplished even if one performs them simultaneously. Here too, since he is unable to betroth the mother and then the daughter, or one sister and then the other sister, his attempt to betroth both of them simultaneously does not take effect. And that concludes our discussion for today. We'll pick it up tomorrow, God willing, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, with page 51. Let's look at a couple of questions or comments on page 50. No, says Nina, no questions. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow. Have a great night, good moed, and moedem l'simcha. We wish each other joyous intermediate days of Sukkot.